In this video series, I will be breaking down my development processes using my concept for my new book, Our Lot, as the guinea pig. For anyone who isn't sure what this series is about, I will link here to the intro, which explains the whole thing. For the rest of you, let's get started. So this is actually the second time I've recorded this. I've in fact recorded about 4 hours worth of video just running through the entire story and explaining it all. But then I had a slight change of course which undermined the entire thing, so I just decided to basically scrap the whole thing. So what happened was, because this book is set in the time of the First Crusade, I was reading through it and taking you guys through the story, but that it also came with the baggage of having to explain a hell of a lot of the actual backstory of the actual real life events which occurred, because you guys need to know that in order for me to explain my approach to it. There are certain choices I make here and there. There are certain things which happen in the real life story which inspired me to take a certain point of view to try and get into the psychology of the characters and try to depict their point of view from that angle. So it sort of, you kind of needed to have that backstory in order to properly understand that. But the problem is that just, like I said, it took about 4 hours to explain, and that's ultimately not the purpose of this channel. This channel is about the process. Also, while I was doing it, while I was learning more and more about the history, because I myself am actually quite new to the history of the First Crusade. I know a lot of, I knew the general gist, and I know a lot of the backstory, other historical events around it, and the basic sort of layout of the whole thing. But this is the first time where I've actually gone right into learning the details of it. And as I found out more and more, naturally came more ideas, and what came from that is a second book called Our Light. There are essentially two stories to the story of the First Crusade. There was the main one, which is called the Prince's Crusade, which is, the one that was the successful sort of campaign for Jerusalem. But there was also this little prequel event called the People's Crusade, or the Paupers Crusade, which happened the year before. Our Lot is about the Paupers Crusade. Our Light is about the Prince's Crusade. And I wasn't originally focusing on the Prince's Crusade because it's just been... with my books, my main interest level is on the psychological aspect, the placing of ordinary people into extraordinary circumstances. So with my initial concept, I was getting far more interest in simply just the Paupers Crusade. The reason why it's called Our Lot is based upon the phrase the peasant's lot, as in we do what we must. It's the idea that we still hold today, that things happen for a reason, and and especially back in those days, how they all talk about, everything's God's will, God places us here and there, and we continue that today. We just change the nouns. But anyway, so that's what this story is about. I just simply use the vehicle of the Paupers Crusade as the delivery platform. Now, but then as I got to know more and more about the story, I started coming up with ideas for this second story regarding the Prince's Crusade, because that itself is such an interesting story, full of an entirely different psychological perspective. This is from the prince's level. Like, Our Lot is told from the peasant's level. Our Light is the prince's level, and they've got similar yet very different perspectives from this extraordinary time of 1095 to 1100, that little sort of 5-year period. And so that's what I wanted to focus upon, and the ideas just picked up enough for me to develop an entirely separate story to be running alongside our lot. So that's why I decided just to scrap all the 4 hours of recording which I did before and just start over again. Now, this second time through, I do not want to go through this whole big massive history info dump again, because again, that's not what this video channel is about. I don't want to be spending an hour explaining the backstory. So what I will do instead is I am going to link in the description pretty much the best source that I can find so far on giving you a complete rundown of the First Crusade, and that is by a guy, well the channel's called Real Crusades History, but I'm pretty sure it's just one guy who does it. He's got this documentary. It's actually like multiple videos that he's done that he's packed into one, which tells you the entire thing. So if you're interested in finding out the story, the real life story, which will therefore help you understand my story, then watch that and it'll give you the rundown. I think I'm pretty damn sure he's the best. He's at least the best one that I can find so far. Other ones, other sources, other YouTube channels, I definitely won't call them historians, because they seem to be really heavily politically biased, because the Crusades especially are a very controversial topic. They shouldn't be, because they're just history like everything else, and that's why I like this Real Crusades History guy, is because he just goes straight from the sources. He takes sources from both sides and he delivers the median narrative in between, which is, that's history. That's what we should be doing. We need to be studying and delivering history as neutrally as we can, or as objectively as we can, in order to just gain at least, again, a median sort of knowledge of it, understanding of it. When it comes to us, the creatives, to take the agenda, to impose an agenda or a personal bias, or to anchor it to a selective theme, that's our job. That's what we do really well. And in that in itself is very valuable to the reader, to the audience. It's not just a benefit in the respect of the author's own personal indulgence. No, it's what fiction does, which non-fiction can't do. Well, there is a reason why all the best non-fiction seems to anchor itself around anecdotes and stories. It's because we evolved around campfires, around word of mouth, around telling stories, and how we view the entire world, how we approach existence, is through this sort of cause and effect lens. There's always an end game. Even when you hear people talk about evolution and things like that, you'll often hear people use phrases like, what's the evolutionary advantage, and things like that, which sort of, you can sort of tell, not always, but you can quite often see that they're coming at it from almost like a religious perspective, as if there was a design and an intent for that result, when that's just not how a lot of that stuff works. It's simply, quite often, it was just simply the only option. But anyway, so that's a whole other thing. I might make more philosophical videos in the future, but for now, no. But the benefit of fiction is that fictional authors, and not just authors, movies and things like that, are able to much more effectively deliver the human experience and anchor the audience to that experience. We can get people far more intimately relating themselves in that context that we depict. And that's just something that, when you watch a video like Real Crusades History, they tell it from a level of remove, and that's how it should be, in my opinion. But fiction has the ability to really place you into it and really put you in the person's mind. it's much more sensory. It's anyway, you get what I mean. So as a fiction writer, I actually see distinct advantage in that, and to the extent that I actually take it a bit another step forward, I actually make things slightly hyper-real. In my near future books, that takes more of a it takes a certain level of extreme in my near future books. In this particular book, I'm really emphasizing the psychological perspective. Now, I myself am not religious. In fact, I am so non-religious that I don't even call myself an atheist. But the people back in 1095 on both sides of this battle, this campaign, were obviously ridiculously religious, like die-hard religious, literally die-hard religious. So that level of devotion has significant psychological effects. It really drives the way and alters and pilots the way you you connect with the world around you. And I really want to emphasize that. Like, one of my main research sources that I'm using for this is the illustrations of a guy called Gustave Doré. This guy is an illustrator from 1870s, I want to say, but he did 100 drawings to complement this other quintessential work by this other guy, whatever. I bought this book though, which is just his drawings alone. And what he does, don't know if you can see that, he draws, most of his drawings don't focus on supernatural elements. They're mostly quite literal in their interpretations. But every now and then, considering I guess you can see that, every now and then he'll have these drawings where he will depict the supernatural element. This one is just he doesn't name the angel here, but he's guiding them on their way to Jerusalem. There is another version. It's the Siege of Antioch. Yeah, another one here. When they arrive to Jerusalem, they see the angel of St. George up on the hill. Now, back in the day, they might have just seen a dust storm or something and then just interpret it as St. George. But to them, that was fucking St. George that they just saw, and he just gave them a complete pass to go run at those walls and take out Jerusalem. Now, so I want to depict that. That's how I'm sort of writing this book. I'm going to be using select little words, select little key tripwire nouns and little hints and little leading sentences, straight out misleading sentences in order to depict that mentality. They'll look and they'll see a fucking devil, or they'll see, St. George or whatever it is. That's something I really want to do, because back in those days, from their perspective, that's absolutely what happened. They literally saw St. George on that fucking hill. When we today look back on those moments of history and we see what happens, we make the big mistake of trying to look at it from our contemporary viewpoint. And that they just did not think the same way. The entire world, the world existence itself, was completely different for them than it was for us. And that's what I try to develop in this book. And anyway, so and I'll explain this more and more as I go along. This is going to be several videos in the making. I'm not going to get to explaining the actual story in this video. I'm going to show you what I do for a concept strafe, but I'll save the actual explanation, the actual telling of the story for later on. So, okay, so I'll get started. Alright, so what you're seeing here is the concept strafe for our lot. I've also got it down for our light as well. They're both sitting at about the same level of development, but I'm only going to show you our lot for this one. I'm using a program called Scrivener, by the way. Now, anyone who's familiar with anyone who's a writer, this won't be anything new to you guys. I've been using it for maybe a year and a half, and it's great. I'm actually going to do a different video going through all the tools I use and other alternatives and things like that, so I won't go into detail here. But the good thing about Scrivener is that it really relates to my development method, the Whitebox prototyping method that I use, and that's because you can see this is essentially the outline that I've got right here, and right off the bat I've just divided them up into different scenes from start to finish, and these things can be moved around however we want them. Which is something I used to do in Word docs anyway. I would just write a sentence and move it around and rewrite it and things, but this just makes it easier, and you can put it into different folders and everything. I've got the original draft of the story here, and this is the much more fleshed out one. In fact, I'll show you. So this is the original. This was the first pass right here, just single sentences. This is what I did. I just wrote down single sentences as I came up with them. In fact, I think I started midway because that was the scene that I wanted to write first, and then I just sort of worked forward and back as they came to me. But the whole point of this what I call a concept strafe is to never lose momentum, at least not until your brain wants to actually focus on something and flesh something out. You just go where your brain wants to go. You take as long or as fast as your brain tells you to. So in this first version, you'll see I've got French peasant Remy wakes in the morning with his young wife Sophia. Remy, I know and I knew at the time, is far too modern a name, but that didn't matter because I was doing the concept straight. So there was just simply the first name that jumped into my head, so that's what I wrote down and I moved on. In the new version, his name's Balian, and that's because I looked up medieval French names and I found Balian, and I wrote that down. And for anyone who knows the history of the Crusades, no, it's not that Balian. It's a different Balian. That Balian lives in another 100 years' time, so it's not him. I'm just using the name. So now in this second version, I've gotten, because I already had the basic premise of the first version in my mind, that allowed me to just start answering a few questions, and I just started writing little dialogue strings here and there. Like in the first version, French peasant Remy, blah blah blah, and I said working perhaps carpentry, because I didn't know what he was going to be doing at the time of writing it. Now I have him, Balian is a carpenter in France, new young wife Sophia, because I've already decided. In the first pass, what'd I do? So I wanted to show that they were pious, both pray before crossing the wall. That hasn't changed. They talk of children perhaps waiting for some reason or haven't been successful. I have since decided that Balian is stalling on having children because he wants to build a better home. He wants it to be perfect for her. Now, and that's because I already had that knowledge in my head. I would start writing these little strings, like see Sophia's asking him, and see, here's another example of the concept strafe. I've just left a space there where I haven't bothered writing like she said, or she surmised, she assumed, or anything like that. I just wrote it. Balian, must we truly wait? Why not just this home? And then he says, because it's too small. It's perfectly fine. It's no smaller than both our family homes. We both lived with a lot more than 3. Let's just have our family now. And I just write in present tense, watches her, pulls her arm towards the door. Come on. What? No, Balian, while there's still light, come on. You do this all the time. I knew we shouldn't have said come. And he gently ushers her on. Again, present tense. I jump between present and past tense because I tend to write in present tense purposefully, almost as if I'm writing in red, as if to say this is working copy, this is not final copy. Sometimes I might slip into past tense when I start getting a bit more of an aesthetic, when I start taking more of an aesthetic feel to the actual sentence structure and so on. But generally, I purposefully keep it present tense until I start actually filling it out, and then I convert it all to past tense. That way, when I'm reading through it, skimming through it later on, and I start seeing present tense, I know that bit still needs to be fleshed out more. So, but anyway, it's nothing, neither here nor there. It's just a little trick I use for myself. So, and then again, so jump between scenes. I've just done 2 spaces there. Yeah, he leads her out the door, and now they're standing actually together in a grassy field. And in my mind, I've just got them in this grassy field, and he's got sticks outlining the floor plan of their new home, and he's just sort of holding her behind the waist, and he's sitting there saying like, the fire will be there, and she's like, yes, I know, and our bed will be there, yes, I know. And he's just sort of reminding her and telling her it's going to be perfect, and she just wants to have the kid and everything. But anyway, I'll explain all that when I get to actually telling the story in another couple of videos time or so. But for now, I'm just explaining the concept strafe. Again, just jumping through single sentences. Peter the Hermit shows up to inspire everyone. Yeah, I'll get to that. What else? Okay. So another change I did. Here, I used to have a guy. The first pass, I just called him the Bullish Lord, because that's all I was thinking of him as. Just this sort of, I didn't have a name for him. I didn't want to stop to bother naming him or researching a name. I just wrote Bullish Lord because I was picturing this douchebag, and I even wrote it. Lord is a standard ignorant douche, because that's how I saw him. He's just exactly that. That's all I needed to write down. And but he has done some serious shit, and he wants to atone for his sins. So when Peter the Hermit comes through and mentions the Pope's offer, what they call, I think they call it the papal indulgence, something like that, which basically, if you go on the crusade, you get a remission of sins. And so he signs up, and again, I'll get to all that. But the difference is that guy's now different. This Bullish Lord, I've changed. Because now he is a real world guy called, where is he? Lord Joffrey Burrell. Now, in the real world, in the real life story, this name, Joffrey Burrell, he basically just shows up out of nowhere. He becomes really influential in the whole thing, and then he just disappears. And you look into him more, and there's no further explanation. There's no backstory or nothing. He just sort of, it's all told from the Pauper's perspective. Pauper's Crusade is told from certain leaders' perspective all the way down. Then suddenly this Burrell guy jumps up and does things, and then disappears. And it's just like, well, who was that? So that's in learning and reading more about that. That's where I just thought, okay, I anchored him to the actual Lord character, and I'm actually making him a fully fleshed out character all the way through. And not only that, but I'm also linking him to another name in the Prince's Crusade, which also has no backstory or explanation. I'm anchoring them together into the same sort of thing. And it also helped me to really work out, again, an alternate psychological perspective. Again, I'll get to it when I go through the story. I think that's all I want to cover in this video. There's no real point in going through it. I've already talked about past and present tense. Do I have any notes? Oh, just little gaps and things that I don't know if I've got any here. Quite often I'll use little placeholders. I'll just show you an example. So if I were to write, okay, so if I were to write, hello, said, and I didn't have someone's name, quite often I'll just go that. How are you? There you go. And I would simply just write that as a gap, as a placeholder, and I will literally just repeat that whenever that character or that place or that whenever I need a name for something and I don't have a name, that's what I'll write. And then when my head is free of that scene, maybe that's when I'll research it. Like sometimes some of my books will be filled with those little gaps for months, right up until the final stages, and then suddenly I'll just go, okay, I better find a name for that, and I'll spend some time researching and I'll actually nail down what that is. But I just wanted to show you that little technique as well, because it's pretty much integral to how the concept strafe works. It's about keeping momentum. It's that whole discovery writing thing again. It's about keeping the muse alive and keeping that rolling, but again in an outline sort of strategic approach. Okay, so I'll leave it there. I don't know how many videos this is going to take, but over the next however many, I'm going to be stepping through each of these sort of scenes, and I'm going to try where I can to extrapolate out some technique to show some method that I was thinking of, or at least some sort of form of approach I'm taking, something more than simply just telling the story. I'm going to try and base each video on something a bit more substantial. Who knows? Sometimes I just might simply just go through the story. I don't know, but either way, you'll see what happens when I do. So yeah, I'll leave it there. If you have any questions about this technique, about concept strafing, because remember, this is how I would, if I was designing a website, if I was designing a game, anything like that, I'd take this exact same approach. So yeah, so if you have any questions on how to apply it to specific things, I will be doing extra videos explaining to at least some extent, expanding the technique out to those other fields. But yeah, if you have any questions, put it in the comments section. I will respond, or I'll make a reply video or whatever. Yeah, like and subscribe if you can. Support me on Patreon. Look into my books. I'll see you in the next video.